Okay, so I'm starting a new file, and what I'm going to do in this lesson is show you how you can do some really fun things with filters and smart object layers. So I've already set up my headset so that it's got the vector mask on it, and I've shown you this enough times that I think you know how to do this. I am taking my move tool and just sliding this image over to the background JPEG image, and then I'm also closing it up and taking the guitar player over. Okay, so let me close up the guitar player and just start out with the guitar player. I kind of like this image, but it needs a little bit more pizzazz to it, maybe to sharpen it up or do some depth of focus, something. So I'm taking this image, and of course, a couple things you should know. If you choose File, Place, whether it be a Photoshop image or an AI image, it's going to place as a smart object. If you are taking an existing layer that is not a smart object layer yet, you need to right-click on it and choose Convert to Smart Object, or of course Control-click if you're on the Mac. Another option would be to do this. I'm Control-Zing that. I could also choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, which will, of course, change this into a smart object as well. Either way allows me to come in here and choose items. Like for instance, maybe I want to unsharp mask this image, and I'm going to give you a little education on what unsharp mask is and why you want to use it. This is the best way to sharpen your images, and the reason why is even though the default is horrible, the settings give you a lot of control. And let me explain this. Amount goes from 0 to 500. And I explained this a little bit in an earlier lesson, but you want to stick with around 150 if you're not sure what you're doing. Radius depends on how big the file is going to be used. I typically leave this around 1 pixel, but if you're using this image for billboards, you might want to go a little larger, but that is showing you the halo that is being created around your edges. Threshold is, of course, the most critical because right now with a threshold set at 0, Photoshop is looking at this image, I'm going to zoom in for you, and determining that every pixel that is next to a pixel that is even one shade different than itself is an edge, and it is trying to sharpen it. When I click and hold, you see how smooth his skin is. When I let go, you see it's actually become noisy. So I changed this to a 10, and that indicates to Photoshop, hey, if the pixel next to you is within 10 shades of what you are, don't sharpen it. Now I'm going to go back to 100%. And I'm going to exaggerate the sharpening so that you can see a difference. So again, I'm exaggerating it so you can see what I can do with the smart object. I click OK. Using a smart object for the filter, I can turn off or on the effect of that filter, which is great in itself. I can even double click on Unsharp Mask and choose that I don't really want it up that high, that I want it a little lower. Remember, when you're working with filters, always try to work at actual pixel view, or else what happens is you see some artifacts due to your screen that aren't really there. But my favorite part is that I have this empty mask here that allows me to go in. I'll take my paintbrush tool, make sure my opacity is at 100 by pressing 0, and I can choose that I don't really want to sharpen, let's say, around his face. And you can see that it's becoming a little smoother there. What's really critical to me is this equipment up here. And so I want to see the guitar. I don't want him so crisp and so sharp. And if I zoom in, you'll see that when I press X to switch to white, I can make this sharper again. Or press X to shift to black. I can undo the sharpening. So the benefit to this, let's say you've got somebody in a houndstooth jacket and you want to sharpen up the image, but man, the moire that's created by that, you can paint out the moire. You can paint sharpening where you want only. I can even take this a little further, and I can take this entire mask. I can press Alt or Option Delete, which fills the entire filter mask with black or my foreground color, and then I can press X and I can paint only what I want sharpened. So I can come in here and choose that I want to bring the guitar out only. and I'm painting the sharpening in. And you don't have to do this at 100%. I'll undo by pressing Control Z, Control Alt Z again, just to go back. You can see I'm undoing. Oops, it went a little too far, so Control Shift Z to go back. But I can press 5. My opacity now is 50% on my brush. And then I can just paint back 50% of the sharpening. Or if I paint a couple times, I can get it back up to 100 by just adding that painterly effect to it. So you can use this for any of your filters. I'm going to add one more filter to this, and I want to show you something when I do this. Pressing Control 0 or Command 0 to see the whole image. I want to do a depth of focus, so I click on the layer to make sure it's active. I choose Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to really blur this out so you can see a difference. But this is what I also want you to see. When I applied a second filter to this, you see that they both share the same mask. So what do I do about this? What if I want multiple filters applied, but I want a different mask for each item? Well, that's pretty easy, but involves just smart objecting a smart object. So I'm taking the Gaussian blur and I'm just dragging it down to the trash can so that that filter has been removed. I am taking this layer and I am going to call it Guitar Player just so that I can remember what it is. But I've already made a smart object out of it. That's okay. I can right click and convert it to a smart object again. And now I have built within this the sharpening filter, and I can go and apply another filter. So I'll choose Blur, Gaussian Blur. Sure, that looks great. But in this case, I have a brand new mask to work with, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to press X to bring my black forward, press Alt Delete, and I actually only want to see the guitar. So I'll make my brush really large, pressing the right bracket, and I'm also going to bring my brush opacity down a little bit, maybe to a 30%, so I press 3, I press X to switch to white, and you'll notice that I am kind of blurring out the rest of this image, painting the blurriness where I want it to give me more of that depth of focus look. And since I did it at 30%, I'm not just blowing this out all at once. It's giving it more of a painterly effect. And so if I Alt click on my mask, you can see this is sort of what it looks like right now. I now have two separate smart filters applied to this. And what if I need to get back to that sharpening one? Double click, open up the image as a separate file in Photoshop, and you'll see there resides your smart filter thumbnail mask. And you can still go in and change your unsharp mask. You can still go in and open up your mask if you want, or you can just simply close it and it is embedded inside the other file. So lots of unlimited things you can do once you start working with smart filters. Now I'm going to take this a little bit further. Let's say that you want to sharpen this image, but yet you've been taught this cool little method of going into fade, your blending mode, to luminosity, so that when Photoshop sharpens your image, it doesn't sharpen any red or blue pixels that might be stray. And this is an old trick that goes way back. And so what a lot of people do is they'll choose Edit Sharpen, they'll sharpen their image, and then they'll go under Edit Fade, and then choose Luminosity mode. But if you happen to do a step or two in between, your fade is grayed out and not available anymore. But notice that if I come back in here and I double click to open up this file, I can go into Unsharp Mask, I can right click on the Unsharp Mask, and I can edit the Smart Filter blending options at any time, and I can change the blending options to luminosity, or even just pull down the amount of sharpening that I've applied. But the great thing is, as long as this remains a smart object, I can do this as many times as I want, months away from when I originally created the file, and keep editing this until I choose that I don't want it anymore. And then of course I can right click and I can choose to rasterize this layer, which will take the embedded file and just build it back in as a regular layer.